Tom here, FlipAnything USA. So today we're going to talk about subject to and why I think it could be in real trouble. Subject to deals where people transfer their properties into an LLC that they do not own, and it's a way of transferring the asset to someone else. I recently did a video on Pace Morby talking about, I did one where I disagreed with him on LLCs, another one where I took issue with the subject tos, and I disagreed with what he characterized as a good deal or a great deal. I can't remember. I'm going to explain to you. Listen, the very first property I ever bought, it was a subject to deal. It was basically a wrap, an all-inclusive trust deed. That's what you call a wrap. AITD, all-inclusive trust deed. I am going to show you exactly why I think subject to is in big trouble with these bank collapses and everything else, and we'll get into it in a second. You want to learn how to make millions of dollars in real estate? I've made tens of millions over my lifetime, and I'm showing people how to do it. Get in my free webinar. I have it every Thursday, 7 p.m. Central. Go to the link below, FlipAnythingUSA.com/webinar. Sign up for it. You can talk to me face-to-face if you want. Don't waste any time. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. You don't want to miss my channel. I've been doing it for years. Please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, but number one, hit subscribe. I've been buying and selling property since 1981. I was very lucky to get involved with real estate at 19 years old. I was a millionaire by 27. That's about like 1988, I guess, 88 or 89. It's unusual that you're going to find somebody as young as I am with so many years experience, because most people don't get that experience till later. I've seen a number of collapses. I've made a lot of money from the big bank crash in the 80s. There's a lot of things that can happen. It's my experiences that indicate to me this subject to transfer. You're going to see a lot more notes called, and I'll explain why. This is part of the video that I did recently.
Think about the opportunity we have. People have been accumulating 2%, 3%, and 4% interest rate loans for the last 5-6 years, and now they can't sell those houses without subject to. It's crazy. You guys are part of the greatest flow and greatest change in real estate in creative finance ever in history. All the previous educators that I look up to, they never had this perfect alignment of everything.
I didn't understand why he felt so strongly. If you've ever seen a big bank crash, and I have, and I'm not talking about 2009, that was nothing compared to what happened in the 80s. First property I ever bought, 10% interest. And my first $1 million I made in the 1980s. And you want to talk about owner financing and creative financing? See this book here? This book, the 80s. It's where I made my first million, actually. Lots of HUDs. If you ain't got a HUD, you're a dud, or whatever the Pace Morbians say, and I mean that respectfully. I totally respect that, actually. I got lots of HUDs. All these are in the 80s and 90s, like early 90s. Let's go to Google Earth. This is a property that's a result of a bank fallout, what I anticipate happening. And this is why I'm going to explain to you why I think you guys that are carrying notes should be very concerned. They never talk about the downsides, or I haven't seen many people talk about the downsides of carrying a note. There's all these reasons why you can fix it. You can deed it back. You can put it in a contract for deed. You can do an all-inclusive trust deed, which is a wrap, which, believe me, if the bank calls you out on an alienation clause, they're not going to let you wrap it, because they can call it due for both of those things. The only saving grace that you really have is if a property is a homestead, then you can deed it back and they won't foreclose on it. But if it is a non-homestead property, and believe me, if somebody sells it and you take a note into an LLC and you start renting it, they really don't have a homestead anymore because they don't live in it anymore, and they can call the note. And so this is just some of the common sense. I've been doing this for 42 years, and because of the things I've seen, appreciate Pace. I've never talked to him. I don't know him, and I take issue with anybody that I disagree with, and I think everybody should be open for debate. Why I don't think this is a great alignment or convergence, I think it's actually kind of I'm hoping anyways that it's going to be as big a disaster as it was in the 80s. This property is a perfect example. I bought 3 of these buildings, not all the same transactions. This is a 21 unit property here. That's about 20,000-ish square feet. They were all 2-bedroom, 1 bath. This is another one, 13 units that would have been about 12,000 square feet. And this is another building I actually bought. This is another 24 units I bought. But I'm going to talk about this right now because this is relevant to why I feel the way I feel. I bought this building for $210,000, believe it or not. And I bought this property here for $130,000. I bought them together. I paid $340,000 for these buildings. Paid cash for them. This is like 1990, something like that. I'd already made $1 million in real estate by then. So I was a full-time investor. I've been a full-time investor. Early, I've been a full-time investor for 42 years. I was self-employed since I was 19, and it gave me the flexibility to do these things. These buildings together were actually at $400,000. Somebody got in front of me. You guys talk about creative financing. Believe me, I've been doing the creative financing my whole life. Listen, when you're 19 years old and you have no credit, it's not that you have bad credit, you have no credit. You got nothing but creative financing that can be going for you. These two properties, to explain this. Here's the deal. I've got these apartment buildings. Let's just see, there was the 13 unit. Remember it quite well. And then across the street from it, I had this big unit. It was actually similarly shaped. You wouldn't know it to look at it from the street. That's kind of what it looked like. In fact, there used to be a swimming pool. There used to be a pool there. But you know what happened? We got rid of that pool. You don't want a swimming pool. It was too close to the edge. It's where kids could jump off the roof and dive into the pool. So no swimming pool. This is the street. Properties across the street, sister properties. Now, here's the concern. And follow me. It's a knockout deal. I made over $1.5 million on these two properties, or right in there, maybe $1.4 million, $1.5 million. I bought these for $340,000. Let me tell you the story about the folks that bought it just a little bit before me. This building sold when it was in distress to the bank. The bank foreclosed or took it away, and they sold it for $1.2 million. Guess what? Didn't last long. It went back to the bank again. The bank sold it again for $750,000. Went back to the bank again. Sold for $550,000. Things got worse. Went back to the bank again. I bought it. That's when I bought it. Actually, they wanted $400,000. And if you ever get in my mentorship, I'll explain to you how I got it for $340,000. This is what can happen in bad times. Rents can go down. Rents are going down right now in different parts of the country. You've got the rents going down. Believe it or not, check this out. I remember what brought me to Texas at that time. TV Guide, which I don't even think exists anymore. Texas, parts of Texas being some of the cities where the best quality of life and the cheapest rents. How weird is that, right? The cheapest rent in the best places to live. That's what it was. That's where it was. Foreclosures everywhere. They had sales in like the Dallas and Houston Times or whatever the papers were, where on the Sunday they actually had like a 10% off coupon. If you bought any house on that page, bring this and you could get another 10% off. In fact, here's the other thing. Check this out. Real estate became so devastated that it was cheaper to buy a place than it was to rent a place. Okay? Cheaper to buy than rent. Now, that doesn't work very well for you guys that are taking over a note and you say equity will come, equity will go, but the cash flow will flow and flow or whatever. I've had a couple of people make that comment on my page regarding the subject to. So the cash doesn't always flow. And the problem is that the opportunity isn't going to be that you can take over these notes and rent them out. What'll happen is, or what can happen is, so much of that goes on the market that while you're hanging onto a property that's maybe upside down, $100,000 or $50,000 or $30,000, whatever, it could be $1 million, depending on how big it is. Other people are buying those properties from the bank for less than you owe. So in other words, that's the opportunity. The opportunity is in the buying. And that's what I had here. And that's what this guy thought he had. That's what this guy thought he had. And then I came along and I did get it at the bottom. I got it at the $340,000. And guess what? I didn't sell it for 1.2. I sold it for about $1.8 million. Okay, $1.8 million. So just under $1.5 million profit. That's what you have to understand, is that you could be in a position of holding these notes and the bottom falls out, the rents go down, And let's just say you got a $2,000 a month deal and you're making $500 a month or whatever you guys think is a good deal. Well, one air conditioner goes out, that's $5,000. That's your income for a whole year, okay? Tenant moves out, lose a month, have to redo it, what we call a make-ready on the property. That'll cost you a couple grand and lose a month's rent. There you go. There's 2 or 3 months rent, right? 2 or 3 months profit on 2 or 3 months rent for you guys that, feel so confident holding on to something simply for cash flow and not for equity. Listen, I make my money on the purchase. I have a very different mindset than you folks that are willing to buy a property that's up to the teeth in debt. And here's the other issue, is the person, nobody ever talks about the downside, the seller, this idea that you're going to keep the seller and all these people in touch, and I get it, I understand it can work, believe me. The very first property I bought like that, and I'll show you that in a minute. But just keep this in mind. $1.2 million property, okay? I bought it for $340,000. I sold it for $1.8 million. Basically, I paid $10,000 a unit, and I sold it, paid $10K per unit, sold $55K per unit. You follow me? Now, maybe I could have jumped in and assumed this guy's debt, and maybe I could have done a better job keeping it rented and not made $700,000, basically. These are the things why I don't care for the subject to that much. And let's talk about what happens when things go bad. So the seller, and I don't know, you guys call it the client or whatever you guys call it. So the seller, deeds the property to you, to the LLC. Now, you've got control of the LLC, and I get it. You're making their payment. But what happens is this person decides, you know what, I want to buy another home. So they go to get a home. They go to buy somewhere else, okay? And the bank lets them know. The bank says, we'd love to give you a loan, but we already show, to this seller. The seller has a $250,000 loan, let's say, on the books. So the bank says, you owe $250,000. And they say, well, what's that for? And then they tell the bank, oh, well, I kind of sold it. They go, well, you didn't sell it. It's still in your name. The debt's still in your name. So in other words, they're still in debt up to their teeth, basically, or could be. This person can no longer buy anything. That will upset the seller, which can lead to, and I know of one case, at least one case for sure, that seller went and got a lawyer and went and got to the person that had assumed their property in an LLC, and they told them, listen, we're going to sue you if you don't pay this thing off. Now, fortunately for this guy, he actually bought the property far enough under market that he did it right. He bought it under market so he could refi it. And you could say it's debatable whether or not she'd have a case or not, but the bottom line is she could call the bank and say, hey, listen, and then they can call the note due. And I know a lot of you think that, you can just deed it back. Well, the homestead clause may not save you, because if they're not living in it, and keep in mind this too, when things are going to hell, believe me, everybody sues everybody blames everybody, I've seen it. So what can happen is, imagine that you've got this $250K loan, that you're happy with, because it's 3% interest. Sounds good, right? Well, here's the deal: when things are going to hell, and the banks are they're going to pot, they're getting bought by other banks, and the assets are moving around big time. And I'm talking about the notes now. This bank finds out that you made this deal with this seller, and you go, oh, well, we'll just deed it back. Well, maybe the seller doesn't want it back, and really maybe the bank says, hey, you know what? We don't want to loan money at 3%. We want to loan money at 8%. We want to make 5% more than we're making, and we have every right to do that because you breached your contract. The person that sold you this property breached their contract, and you know that this was unassumable. What would you do? If it was me, I'd foreclose. I would say, sure. Or I would say, you want to keep it? No problem. Let's refinance it for you at 8%. Now, you refi this 8% on this asset that's going down in value. Now, 8% on an asset that may be under market, or even if it's at market, again, you kind of lose the whole advantage of the whole, the whole subject to thing. So just consider that. Now, look, I'm gonna show you another property. I'll kind of make a defense here for subject to a degree. So I'm going to show you the property, the first property I ever bought, 45030 North Trevor. I bought this when I was 19 years old. Now, look it. I love creative financing. Without creative financing, like I said, I made my first million in my 20s back in the 1980s, and believe me, that's like having 2.8 or $3 million now. So believe me, I had so much money. I'd made so much money that, and I was so young, people spoke on the sidelines thinking that I was a drug dealer or that I had somebody backing me. So this is the first property I bought. I had a cabinet shop. And I was actually really, really struggling because I started a cabinet business at 19, and I was struggling. I had another building I had rented up the street here, way up the street, and the owner that I was renting from, he found out that I was actually living in it. I actually lived in an office within the little cabinet shop that I had, and because I was struggling, I didn't want to fail. I did not want to fail, and so I was actually living in my building. The landlord told me, he says, "Hey, Tom, listen, I like you, but you can't live in it." Somebody told me you're living here. I said, "Yeah, I am." He says, "Well, you need to move." He goes, "I'm afraid that this place is going to catch on fire, burn up, and you're going to die, and I'm going to get sued." So I started looking. Good old Bob Dennis, that was my real estate agent that took me around, and we were trying to find a property to rent. And he pulled up to this place. And here's the funny thing is I used to work here. My boss that had been in there, the times were so tough, he had gone under. He laid me off. That's why I went into business for myself. And now here I am looking to rent a place, and he pulls up in front of this place, and he says, "Well, how about this place?" I go, "Man, it's way bigger." I mean, I had a fraction of that much space in the cabinet shop that I was renting already, just tiny compared to this. This is 5,900 square feet. And I said, "Well, look," I go, "I'd love to buy it." I go, "But I'm 19. And I had hair down to my shoulders. I was in sawdust all the time. My eyes were bloodshot. I had allergies. I looked like I was high. Long hair, bloodshot eyes. It just wasn't a great look. It looked like I was stoned all the time. I wasn't, but I looked like I was. And he says, "Well, maybe the owners will do owner financing." So my very first deal was an owner finance deal, and it was a wraparound. We wrapped 4. That's what you call it, AITD. You guys call it a wrap. It's really called technically an all-inclusive trust deed, a wrap. And guess what? Those are along right next to the alienation clause in most of these bank contracts. You see, they don't want any part of it, and they can be called for that as well. This was a wonderful opportunity for me. I would not have been able to buy this property if it wasn't for the fact that it was a creative finance deal. It was owner financed, and basically it was kind of a subject to. I had 4 notes wrapped inside of one, and who knows what was inside those notes? I don't know. And anyways, it's another story. We'll get into this one some other day. But anyways, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. That's what I wanted to share. Look, not everything is as easy as it seems. And sometimes I worry that people don't get perspective on the downsides, like I just described on the little whiteboard there. Bank has an opportunity to foreclose on you, and you can't use that as a homestead excuse. If somebody has already violated, they moved out, they're not in the homestead, it's not there, they don't even live in it. You have different tenants in there possibly. You can get yourself in a lot of trouble. It's not a great way to start when you're young, especially if you get yourself, listen, that's one of the things I can't stand about some of the people out there. There's a lot of fake gurus out there. Listen, I have high regard for Pace. He's got a great loyal following. I don't know much about him. When I say I have a high regard, I don't know anything about the guy. So I have no idea if he's got any high ethical standards or low ethical standards. I just don't know him, okay? But I appreciate that he does have a nice following. Let me just tell you something. You can be a nice guy and you can be wrong. I hope you enjoyed this. Doing this a long time, but it's good to have perspective. It'll make you a better decision maker. I love playing devil's advocate. I love people shoot my ideas down because sometimes they might have something there. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me this long. Be sure to get a copy of my book, Wake Up and Smell the Real Estate. Be the best $10 you ever spent. If you don't know about my mentorship, it is not something that you can just simply join. You have to apply to be in it. I have a very, very high rate of success, very, very high profitability. You can take a look at the testimonials. This gentleman's 34 years old, and he's made he's made 6 deals, and the first 3 he made over $1 million cash, and the last 3 he rolled that money into, and now he's got about $3 million worth of property and only $1.3 million in debt. So he's basically made $1.7 million. This gentleman bought 3 houses shortly after being in the mentorship. This gentleman, he made $600,000 at this time. Now he has more than $1 million in equity. I've done it all. Commercial, industrial. I hold about 185,000 square feet right now of industrial, commercial, office. I have a little more than that if I count the houses. Houses to me are mostly something that I flip. I don't condemn subject to, but I don't like the idea of people thinking that it's okay to jump into something. Equity is important. Banks won't respect you if you don't have equity. They'll think you're nuts, okay? I'm just telling you. You can't borrow against your cash flow, but you can borrow against equity because they'll see how fragile your income is if you don't have equity. Here's the beauty. Even with my portfolio, because I have so much equity, I can take a very, very heavy vacancy rate and still make money. I didn't see the Pace Morby thing with Graham Stephan, but from what I heard, I make more money than Pace does on $30 million than he does on $299 million. $30 million makes as much as $299 million that Pace, I don't know, he says we a lot, so I don't know if it's his or it's a bunch of group of people. But from what I gathered, he's making about $200,000 a month on that. I make that on $30 million. That only comes out about 7%. It's not, that's the rate of return on $30 million. So I can't imagine having such a small margin on such a large amount of debt. That gives me some concern. And listen, Pace, if you ever want to talk, listen, I got nothing against you. Don't know anything about you other than, what I've heard you talk about. And I understand people can have different opinions. People, listen, it's like carpenters. I'm a carpenter. You know what? You may not like the way somebody else does it, but everybody has a different method of building things. So I have nothing but respect for everybody out there that follows Pace. And I know some people were kind of harshly disagreeing with me and, or thought I was attacking them. I'm not attacking them. It's a different point of view. Listen, debate is always good. Hit that subscribe button and again, consider the book.
Yo, stop and listen. Time is on a mission to eliminate all the snake oil and the fake gurus that fake y'all. He'll show you how to build an empire, starting with nothing but a desire. All you really need is a good mentor, not a used car bullshit. With time, you'll learn to crush it. Investing like Warren Buffett. With real estate, you cannot procrastinate. Everyone who hesitates is left at the starting gate. Hey, yo, so don't delay and join today. The mentorship and flip anything. USA, go.